I'm Ed Farrell. I'm 59. No, see the first thing I did anyway. I'm 79 years old, and I've had a wonderful life, wonderful children, wonderful, everything. And here I am as we slide toward the end. So what can I say?
So you talk a lot about going to the library at a very young age. Tell me a little bit about that and what it was like.
Well, during World War II, when I was a small boy, I didn't have there was nothing to do. We had no money. And I learned to go to the library and stay there most of the day because it was free. And I learned to read, and I developed a reading habit that has lasted all my life. And I've read lots of interesting books, and it's been very good for me. It's my hobby to this day. I still like to read.
Now, your mother died when you were very young. How did that affect you at a young age growing up?
I remember specifically my father telling me, your mother has passed away, and I was approximately 5 years old, and I just thought, oh, Mom's not around. I just didn't seem to understand what was really going on. And my dad pretty much raised me, but he'd just give me 50 cents, I'll see you tonight, son. And I had 50 cents, I'd go to a movie during the summer, or I'd go to school. And
what about school when you were a kid?
I remember specifically two guys in particular. With a little bit of luck, I can remember their names. I'm sure they're both dead now, but anyway, they bullied me. But I was a little kid. I was only 4'11". But then when I turned, I think I was, I'm gonna guess, about 14, and I grew 11 inches in 1 year. And those two bullies, who I remember quite well, quit bullying me. I was about as big around as a sock biter or something, but I just all of a sudden didn't monkey with me anymore. And in fact, they were actually friendly to me, which I thought was rather surprising.
I believe you told me at one point that you ran away from school. Was that high school or junior high or?
Yeah, I can't recall.
But anyway, it was a private Catholic live-in school.
John Bosco was the name of the school. Did things that I can remember. I wouldn't eat some carrots, which I like today. And they sat me there till 10 o'clock at night. And I wouldn't eat it until they gave up. But I mean, the whole thing was a little bit like that. And I finally broke into tears in front of my father. I said, Dad, can't you do something about this? This is awful. And so we broke it and went back to public school, and I was living with him. And during the day, I was on my own. And it's a wonder I didn't get into trouble when I think about it today, because there were a few things that I shouldn't have done. And, today, I don't mind saying that I remember we figured out how to break into parking meters, and we'd get, there were a nickel in them, and we'd get, 60, 70 cents, Well, anyway, of course, one time I had I don't know, somebody, an adult, got after me, and I ran and I got away. And I swore I'll never do that again, which I didn't. And I think I've told you the time where we were stealing hubcaps. And I swear it was the first and only hubcap I ever stole. And anyway, and I got it. It was quiet. I was crouched down by the car, and some guy started yelling. And Blaine Pittman was on the other side of the car. He took off and went the other direction north. the guy, well, I was closer to this guy. He came off his front porch, which was there, and got after me. Well, you're scared, you know, and I'm 15 years old. And I ran and ran and ran as hard as I could. And finally the guy, after about 3 or 4 blocks, he stopped. You know, of course, I had to run another block. And I turned around and snuck a look, and he was standing with his hands on his hips, just looking down at me. And he's winded. And I was a block further, and I could see him back there, you know. And I just said, I'm never going to do that again. God, thank you. Little lesson in life, you know, and I had 2 or 3 of those little things. Fortunately, none of them led me to jail or anything, but they led me to not do that kind of thing, which was important.
So you grew up in Long Beach.
Mm-hmm.
I think the part of Long Beach that you grew up in today is kind of a rough area, but when you were growing up, what do you remember about your neighborhood?
Not many of them were trying to better themselves, but I was trying to better myself. And I did. I was largely successful, you know. And like I said, I never did keep track of how much college I had, but I had that 3rd year in. But I never finished it, which I wished I had of just for drill. I was a pretty good writer. That I have to admit that I blundered into that over a period of years, learning to write. And you know, it's like anything, if you start something and you get kind of good at it, gee, it's kind of a piece of cake. And I think, you know, that particular thing worked out pretty well with Brent also. I mean, you know, he did something very similar to his father to some degree, which was a surprise to me. You know, you were not a surprise. I just told you what to do, and you just went and did it. The difference in people, you know, and you're always, you know, your children will change to some degree. You know, and I think of some of my friends. You know, Dave Selway wound up just grabbing the thing and educating himself, and never quit till he had a master's degree in math, of all things. And but Dave was one of those guys, once he decided to do something, he would. And I think, you know, I think about today, it would be something if the good Lord let me do it again, because knowing what I know today, I'd have that 4-year degree, absolutely.
So let's talk about your hobbies a little bit. You've always enjoyed mechanical things and working in the garage on various projects, cars, motorcycles. Where do you think this interest stemmed from?
You know, I don't know. My father, for example, he could hardly sharpen a pencil. He just had no mechanical abilities whatsoever. And I saw him in the garage monkeying around, and he was just monkeying around, didn't seem to know what he was doing. But I got interested in high school because I liked cars anyway. And, you know, Dave Selway got a car, and we got it all apart. And, you know, and other of my buddies did the same thing, and I made a bunch of mistakes while we're learning. But how do you find out about something? Make mistakes. And I learned quite a bit about that kind of thing. And that life did a lot for me because, you know, all the time that I worked for the city there, you might as well say I was an administrator. But I was a good writer. I wound up just becoming an easy job for me. The one difference is, you know, once I retired, I walked away from writing. Because it wasn't my favorite thing to do. It was something I could do and I could do well, but I liked playing with mechanical things. And so I went back to playing with mechanical things. That was the major difference.
And speaking of mechanical things, so throughout your life you've had a few hobbies that were rather dangerous. You did drag racing when you were younger,
Mm-hmm.
and of course you did motorcycle racing all your life. How did you manage, or how did you deal with the aspects of risk involved in those choices?
You know, it's so much of the time I didn't have any trouble. You know, when you talk about that kind of thing, racing motorcycles, yeah, I fell off that darn thing a bunch of times. And I kept getting better and better, but I managed to hurt myself one time in particular. And I beat myself up, broke my collarbone, my scapula, and I think my ankle, all one whack. And I just said, we can't do this. I love doing this, but I can't do this. Or first thing you know, there was a guy I casually knew, he put himself in a wheelchair. And, he was in a wheelchair the rest of his life. And I said, I can't do that. And so all of a sudden I just pulled my horns back in, and I never rode quite as aggressively before. But I rode, as you know, I rode for 40 years. And in those 40 years, sure, I had some great rides in there, but a lot of the time I was buried in the pack, you know, because I just wouldn't take that uneven chance. It just wasn't worth doing, because I had to go to work Monday morning.
Was that worse than you had open heart surgery at an early age? How old were you when you had your open heart surgery?
I was...
You were early 50s, right?
52.
52.
Yeah.
Was that pain
No.
not as bad as the motorcycle crash?
No. Well, first of all, the motorcycle crash, I fell off the thing totally sober, and it beat me up. Whereas when I had that open heart surgery, they had me on some happy pill or something. I hardly knew what was going on. I never forgot one time, I think I was like 58, and I remember some guy there saying, gosh, how do I beat you for crying out loud? Well, yeah, I says, heck, I'm 58 for crying out loud. You know, but I was in that period when I was still in great physical shape, you know, and a somewhat skillful rider too. So I had my moments in time, you know, it was like anybody else.
Mm-hmm. Another topic, you're coming up on your 50th wedding anniversary. Mm-hmm. You've had a very long, successful marriage. Do you have any advice?
Well, I think naturally you get along with each other, and you're considerate, even though you may be different. You know, your mother and I are different. But as a general rule, we get along very nicely, I think. Because I've never been one that forced issues. You don't gain, you know, yes, you're going to have a difference of opinion. And your mother and I have had plenty of them. And I won some and I lost some. So.
You have 3 grandchildren, James, Joey, and Jordan. What are the most important things that you would want them to know, or advice that you would give them? Be
educated, period. No ifs, ands, or buts. You know, once you've got that education, you'll have the leading tools to really make something of yourself. And I think no matter what you wind up doing, you wind up making a mistake here and there, you know, but the bottom line is if you can make those kids, you know, rise up, it's a big reward for them. Mm-hmm. And the big reward for them is a reward for you.
That's true.
And I think I was, when you guys graduated, I was very, very pleased. Just, my gosh, something had to go right.